in touch to ask us the kind of question that looks quite easy but really isn't. Do we have the highest industrial electricity prices in the world? And if so, why? Our energy price correspondent, Richard Varden, also editor of this programme, is on the case. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
I have not seen you with your energy hat on since 2022.
Yes, the days after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, when gas prices rose hugely and all of a sudden domestic energy bills were at the top of the political agenda. Since then, gas prices and bills have fallen, but bills are still high when compared to the years before the war.
But is it right that our industrial electricity prices are the highest in the world?
Yes, if you look at the figures the government publishes for electricity prices compared to peer countries, we are top of the charts and number one. Go us!
Hey, well, hang on, that's actually a bad thing. Makes British industry less competitive, reduces investment, costs jobs, harms economic growth. Richard, why are we in this situation?
Well, for the answer, I went to friend of the programme, Hannah Ritchie, Deputy Editor of Our World in Data, the all-round experts in international comparisons.
Many other countries have deliberately given tax exemptions or levy exemptions for industrial producers in order to make sure that their industries are cost competitive. The UK, we have some exemptions, but they tend to be much, much lower and much, much weaker than in other countries. So other countries have made a deliberate decision. We want to prioritise industry, whereas the UK has not done that to the same extent.
But the problem isn't just for businesses. We have the fourth highest domestic electricity prices. Electricity prices are just high here.
Now, I don't like to ask the obvious question, but I think in this case it's warranted. Why?
Well, a bit of background first. In 2005, across the whole year, we used 35% coal in electricity generation and 4% renewables. Now we use no coal at all, but 35% solar and wind. This is a big change, and we now emit only 20% of the carbon in electricity generation that we did in 2005. But clearly, making this change involves costs. We've had to build a load of wind turbines and install loads of solar panels. Also, we need other energy sources to be able to keep the lights on when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So there are some big benefits, but in the UK we've chosen to pay for it by sticking costs on industrial and household electricity bills rather than the government paying for it out of taxation.
Clear enough so far. I have a feeling, though, that things are going to get a bit more complicated.
Yes, I'm afraid I'm going to have to explain marginal cost pricing. And to do this, I've come up with a metaphor.
Oh, I love a good metaphor.
I'm not sure you're going to like this one. OK, let's imagine I have a big garden and I need some of the more or less team to work in my garden this weekend. I'm not sure how many I'll need, but I need some of you, maybe all.
I think at this point, Richard, I should make it clear that I am not going to come and do your gardening.
OK, come on, Tim. You're an economist. You'll do anything for the right price.
£100 an hour.
That was easy. So we're going to have to use a bit of clever economics to solve this problem. I'm prepared to pay my gardeners, and all you have to do is tell me privately what price per hour you want. For you, apparently, that's £100 an hour. I presume you were talking about gardening.
If that's what you want to think, then fine.
I've asked the rest of the team, and their prices for gardening range from £40 an hour for Lizzie to a minimum wage of £10 for Nathan because he's only 18. Now, if I only need one of you, that's easy. I pay Nathan, and the gardening cost will be £10 an hour. But what if I need more of you? If I want to hire Lizzie as well, I need to pay her and Nathan the same amount. Those are the rules of the auction. That's £40 each, so the gardening is now costing £80 an hour. And if I want to hire you as well, I'm going to have to pay Lizzie and Nathan as much as I pay you.
Yeah, we could never have a system where I was paid much more than everyone else.
No, we couldn't have that. So I'm going to have to pay everyone £100 an hour, even Nathan. So it will cost me £300 for an hour's gardening.
OK, I understand that. That's the rules of the auction. Let us now leave the garden metaphor. Or is it an analogy? Anyway, we'll leave the garden. Let's get back to electricity.
Well, the electricity market works in the same way. Different electricity generators make bids to supply electricity. For an extra hour of electricity, if the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, renewables are going to be cheap. Nuclear is likely to be in the middle. Gas is going to be the most expensive because, well, natural gas is expensive. Now, if we have a lot of renewables, we might not have to use gas. But whenever gas generation is needed, the price leaps up. Not just for gas, but for nuclear and renewables too. They're all getting the same price as gas. And this is what usually happens. Gas sets the price 98% of the time, according to Emma Pinchbeck, Chief Executive of the Climate Change Committee, although some people have suggested to us that the figure could be lower. And that gas price includes extra taxes to discourage industry from using fossil fuels, which are equivalent to 7% of the household bill.
So it's all the fault of gas. We just need to use less gas, presumably by using more nuclear and more renewables.
I'm sorry, but again, it's not that simple. First of all, it's hard to use less gas. We don't have a huge nuclear fleet like France, lots of hydropower like Norway, or coal-fired power stations like Germany. We are also on the edge of Europe, so we don't have as many interconnects to buy power from other countries. We also have a lot of wind turbines in places like the north of Scotland, where there aren't a lot of people, and our grid isn't good at getting that electricity to the south, where the people live. So sometimes we are using gas in the south at the same time as we are paying wind farms to turn off in Scotland.
That seems mad. So who's paying for that?
We are. If you look at a domestic electricity bill, the wholesale cost of the power generation, the bit where the price is likely set by gas, is less than 40% of the final bill. It remains the biggest single item, but there are lots of other bits like paying wind farms to turn off. I got Keith Bell, Professor of Electronic and Electrical Engineering at the University of Strathclyde, to talk me through some of the other costs that together make up the majority of a domestic bill.
So the next biggest bit would be for paying for the networks, so the transmission and distribution networks to get the power from where it's produced to where you are, paying for the infrastructure and paying for operation of those networks. At the moment, that's about 22%. And the next one after that is policy costs. So mainly paying for historic subsidies of the early kind of generation of renewables. When we started building renewables, wind and solar, it was actually quite expensive, but it was, to align with emissions reduction policy, we needed to get going on that and start to build an industry. And that's true from, many countries around the world. So to encourage anybody to build it, they effectively needed a subsidy.
For instance, the renewables obligation and feed-in tariffs that were brought in when the sector needed a lot of help early in the push for renewables, they still put over 10% on our bills.
Which is a lot.
Yes, the good news, as far as our bills are concerned, is that the renewables obligation will be gradually phased out between 2027 and 2037. It's been replaced with a different mechanism which guarantees renewable providers an economic price to cover their investment. That currently costs a lot less, perhaps 4% on domestic electricity bills. Lots of the costs for transmission, distribution and having extra capacity would exist however we were generating power. But they probably cost more because we use a lot of renewables, which are intermittent and often quite remote from population centres. Finally, we have some extra costs which have nothing to do with power generation, like a charge to pay for the warm home discount, or to pay for smart meters, and of course VAT. So how are we going to get our electricity prices down? Well, I asked that question to Professor Robert Gross, who is Director of the UK Energy Research Centre.
In the long run, by which I mean beyond 2030, we need to re-engineer the system so that we're not relying on gas-fired power stations. We've got more storage. We might need to build some bulk storage, for example, in the form of hydrogen. We're going to need much more flexibility in the way that, for example, electric vehicle charging could be moved around by time of day, thinking about whether industrial consumers can be more flexible in the way that they use their electricity. So we're going to need a much more flexible system that can accommodate more renewables without relying upon gas as the balancing item. And that's the situation that we're in at the moment. And that's part of the reason that we've got high prices.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thanks also to Professors Robert Gross and Keith Bell, and to Hannah Ritchie of Our World in Data.
Also, I need to thank some other people who have taken the time to talk to me in a series of very long research calls. Ed Heslett, Energy Analyst at the Centre for British Progress, Joe Bush of Modo Energy, and Nicholas Leighton Hall of MCOE Consultants.
OK, that's enough. You finish your Oscar speech, off the stage.